I'm so used to hosting these, so immediately I'm like, oh, I'll start asking questions. So I have to like be like a little bit careful. I'm used to being in that role. But can I ask you what the name of your podcast means?
Yes. So Kylosophy is actually a recent name change to my YouTube channel as well as this podcast. And pretty much it's just my philosophy. The videos I share are just, you actually made a Facebook Live video titled Thought Experiments.
Yeah.
I checked that one out. It was cool. And it made me think a lot about just what my channel is, because all I'm doing is just exploring thoughts, ideas, things that I'm interested in.
So
And that's what it is, really.
much easier to set it up like that too, that it's an exploration. I was thinking a lot recently about the difference between like prescribing something. So like this is, hey, you need to do this and this will make you happy and this will make you enlightened and all that stuff versus exploring. Like, I'm not sure what it'll do, but do you want to kind of have a play at it? And what if we entertained it for a bit, but we didn't necessarily like believe it, you know? Like that's like basically the core of what I've been playing with lately.
Yeah, totally. And if you're anything like me, you've had a philosophy or you've had a belief, and then later in life, it's been completely restructured, torn down. So the thing
Well,
about philosophies and beliefs are they're always, at least mine are, always open to change, open to shifting.
yeah, mine are now, but they weren't growing up. Like I had the what I call rug burn, where like I really push really really hard, and the universe has to pull me back, and as it pulls me back, I feel my face, rubbing against the carpet. So I'd say more often than not, that's how I lived my entire life, really, until like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and also publicly. So for fuck's sakes, like putting myself out there publicly and pushing philosophies that later I went, oh, that's not quite it. Actually, an easy example of that, there's two of them. Positive thinking, when it first came out, was almost like dogmatic. It was like almost like if you don't think positive, you're negative and you should fuck off. And I feel like that mindset became like toxic positivity quite quickly. And the other one, again, I teach presencing meditation, but to be in the present moment is not necessarily an event. It's actually just paying attention to what is. And back in the day when I first learned that philosophy, I was like, oh, so everyone needs to be present. And that's like, it seems like the key. If I needs to be, should be, all those little weird syntax words, eventually usually come back and actually kick me in the nuts or the face.
Yeah. So you've been in the public eye for a while? Like
Yeah.
before you were kind of doing this meditation instruction, these Facebook Lives?
Yeah. Well, this is a brand new phase, man. I'm 35 and I was 23 when I first started teaching classes and stuff like that. And so being quite young and full of fire and that kind of stuff, it's been, yeah, a lot of my early beginnings really pushing on a single philosophy and being like, it's the truth, it's the truth. And then, yeah, it is a truth, but just contextualizing it within a larger mosaic of truths has been has made things a lot easier, because I don't feel like I'm in fights with a lot of people these days. So it's kind of like I'm not like, yeah, well, my philosophy is right and yours wrong, so go fuck yourself. Like there's like this subtle power plays that were happening a lot in my life actually before I started to catch on to them, and just like slowly but surely just stop creating the mess.
Yeah, so to take that particular belief, like I can totally relate with the positivity thing. I think I was someone at like an early age, I saw just other people acting kind of negatively, and I kind of intuitively knew like to focus on the positive thinking, read books like Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, stuff like that. And I just kind of realized like I have to start brainwashing myself in a positive manner in order to like survive and overcome adversity and stuff. But then there hits a point where, actually, funny enough, I started seeing a meditation instructor. And one of the first things he asked me is he's like, so have you meditated before? And I was like, oh yeah, like I meditate all the time. He's like, so what do you do if you don't mind me asking? I'm like, well, if I have good thoughts, I let them just happen. And when I have negative thoughts, sometimes I'll crumple them up, I'll throw them in a ball, I'll wrap them in wire, I'll throw them into the ocean, I'll blow them up. And I was doing all these crazy things. And he's like, oh, he's like, very interesting, Kyle. He's like, but why don't we try this? And that's when he kind of showed me that in meditation, we're trying to just allow thoughts to come in and out. We're not trying to label them as negative or positive. We're just trying to sit there and observe what's just naturally going on within us.
Yeah, and the only danger, because the positive thinking really did help me in a way, because before I did have more of a cynical view, it helped me reframe things, it helped me see things in a more positive light in the most literal sense. But what I'm sure you've learned this as well, like if you do take something negative and try to make it go away, it actually usually comes back, but like unconsciously. So it's almost like saying, hey, ego, if you want to call it ego, negative thoughts, I don't believe in you, so I'm going to go like this. Then what happens is, like, after sometime within the course of the next few months, those same thoughts come, but almost like, yeah, exactly, bam, like, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, my fucking face, man. Like, so that was like, it was kind of like learning that out of necessity in a way, because it is more appealing, obviously, for things to be positive and for things to be happy. But then there's times where shitty things come up. And I've been in a real place lately, my partner and I talk about this a lot, of not trying to fix the lows either. Like, not being like, I feel low, how do I fix it? I'll eat differently, I'll do this, I'll do that. A lot of times those responses almost make things more complicated, because if you just wait like a day, those things kind of pass by themselves. But the more kind of like involved I get, or the more I'm trying to like micromanage it or fix it, I do find that it actually starts to attack me backwards as well. So it's like, if I have a shit day, like, you know, those days where you just stub your toe every time you take a step and you just like drop shit and everything like that, whenever those happen, I just kind of be like, okay, it's going to be like this for a day, you know, like this is going to be my day where things are just fucking weird. And then I wake up the next day and everything's fine. So I just feel like, but it would be easy in that moment to think, oh, I must have done something wrong. The universe must be mad at me. There must be something out of alignment. And maybe that's true, but I have found the less mental activity I put into it, and the more I just let it kind of unfold, most things will heal themselves, just with a little bit of time and a little bit of patience.
Yeah, and how have you find meditation for kind of allowing you to accept
Yeah,
what's naturally happening to you? Like, is that something
exactly.
that happened over time?
Yeah, it's exactly it. It did. I mean, yes, definitely. And in fact, I almost feel a little bit sour when I've done this myself, but when you learn something new and you're kind of like, hey, this is the truth and it's all good, it takes time to integrate everything. Like, I do think that there's an element of time, and experience is one of the more important parts, but it's easy to forget because our mind happens so quick. It's possible to be like, oh, I got a new philosophy to always be present, so I'm always going to be present. It's like, yeah, maybe. I don't want to shit on anyone either, but I find in my own process, things take time to integrate. And when they're more and more integrated, the less I have to think about them, the more unconsciously in a positive way they almost operate. But everything takes time. So yeah, this is a 15-year process of transformation that I'm going through. What was the actual question though? Like, what were we actually just talking about? I forget.
You know what? What you were saying, I was totally on board with, and I kind of want to not switch gears because it's totally related. But just since you said it's been kind of like your 15-year journey, I'm just really curious, like, what kind of like sparked and like got you pushed off into this direction?
It's kind of a fun story, man. When I was kind of a weird story, and there's lots of ups and downs, but when I was 19, my father had a mental breakdown where he suddenly didn't know kind of who he was. And it came through doing Kundalini yoga and meditation. So he had just lived his life as a computer programmer, very much in the mainstream, still a weird and interesting person, but was caught in a lot of the trappings, I guess you could say, of our modern society. Had a mental breakdown and had to go to a mental hospital actually for a couple of weeks. And in that process, he was kind of like, who the fuck am I? And are the roles and scripts that I'm playing out who I really am? Or are those things that were taught to me? So he went through like a full moment of self-inquiry and changed heaps of stuff. And I was just 19. And at the time, he and I were very close. So we kind of grew together. And I remember one of the more profound shifts in our relationship was when we realized that we were playing scripts at each other. I was playing the script of I'm his son. He was playing the script of you're my son and I'm your dad. And so we ended up exposing the scripts to each other. I was, again, quite young, like 19. And in those moments when we exposed those scripts to each other, and it came from watching The Secret and What the Bleep Do We Know Anyway, like those beautiful hard opening movies that kind of start a lot of people on their journey. I very much got to experience that in 2004 with my dad. And we consciously just started deconstructing our relationship, deconstructing our scripts, realizing that there's no implication that because you're this person that you have to do anything in particular. Like it was really quite a deconstructing process, which is really helpful. And then that led me to realizing who I thought I was isn't true. So all the things I'd set up, all the career paths, all the things, was like I was doing it because I thought I should. It wasn't necessarily because it was coming from my deeper soul or heart or anything like that. So I went through my own deconstructive process when I was 19, and it's kind of weird to do it that early, because usually the typical path is to grow, to create something, and then to overcome that. And I didn't even really get that far into the process before I started to do that transcendence work, which actually did create slight developmental, I don't want to say disabilities, but delays. Because actually learning about it later in psychology and in a lot of Buddhist paths, you're actually meant to really live your full life first and then begin to transcend. But I started the process really early. So there was like this kind of half in and half out experience developmentally. So that was very interesting to understand later. But a big part of it was a complete, naive, blind, but beautiful faith that everything was okay, and that the universe was positive, and that I can create my own life, and that it was I'll never be able to go back to the innocence and naivety, because I did have to grow in order to be like, oh, actually the world is not good for everybody. And there's yes, we're creating, but it's co-creating, and it's co-creating with other people. And it can't be as selfish as saying, I create my reality, no one else exists. It's like, well, that's true on one level, but it's not true on another level. And that's a lot of these openings started as very confident, very again, blindly, yes, the universe is only benevolent and life is only good and all those things. And learn how to use the law of attraction, but it was to do things like get stuff I wanted. And you know what I mean? It was very material based. It was very, how do I get more power? How do I get more love? How do I get more things that are fun and interesting? But then I was 23, so that was about a 4-year process, and I had gone through a lot of big changes, learned how to use the power of the mind, all those things. And then when I was 24, I discovered presence, which just means being fully present in the moment, no sugar coating, no negative coding, just seeing things as they are. And so it was like a spiritual adventure, and then it became another deconstruction, even of the new spiritual beliefs that I had created. So I had to go through kind of a destructive process or deconstructing process again. And during that awakening, when I was 24 or 23, it was actually the full, the traditional Kundalini awakening. So I spent about 2 weeks in this state where my body felt almost like an orgasm. And it felt like an orgasm because I realized that my body wasn't a material, just material, but actually it was the infusion of spirit and material, if that makes sense. So I went through a process of merging spiritual and material understanding to be one sort of field, or one sort of field of presence. And yeah, it knocked open Kundalini. I had heaps of visions about the future. I went to the past. I had past lives come up, and it wasn't like I was like, I'm going to go on a journey to find my past life. They started coming up at me. And that was a very interesting process, because again, as a person who had only thought about the positive aspects of who I was as a person, I had to actually go into some dark stuff from past lives involving Knights of the Templar and all that shit. It took me back into some really deep, painful shadows. And at the time, I wasn't expecting that, because again, I thought, oh, the universe is benevolent, things are always good, flow is awesome, life is positive. And actually going into those deep, dark, painful bits from past lives was exposing the roots of issues that I was having in this current life as well, of course. And so things went from, again, almost like rose-colored glasses to all of a sudden shit like that, almost like a borderline psychosis, because opening up to all of those different perspectives, being able to see from dark and light and up and down and past and future all over the place, it was quite overwhelming, honestly, for my perspective at the time, because I was just a young party boy, essentially. I was just fucking around. And at the time, this wasn't, this is about 2007. This wasn't a really big topic that was talked about either. It was just kind of just kicking off on YouTube that people that were spiritual started to make channels and started to talk about stuff. But I really didn't have any mentors or guides or anything. It was a really bizarre time. But in the end, I feel more whole because of it, having gone through the depths of the shadow, having gone through the understanding of co-creation. Like, I feel like a more whole person in the end. So that was good. But that would be how it was sparked. It was like, actually, it's been a journey that started with my father and then came into my own spiritual experiences. And then again, I was pushing all these spiritual insights that I was having onto people, and then realizing, fuck, that's almost like Christian zealotry, like where you're pushing your views on people. So then I had to pull back. And now, after all that, and after all the ups and downs, like I literally just feel like a pretty average human being. Like I don't even feel like particularly special. And in that, though, in clearing all of that, I feel like I have a more direct relationship with other people and with myself, than a lot of people, because there's not, there's the less belief systems in between actions and in between expression and in between connection with people, the better, in my opinion. And so more and more and more, it's just direct. It's not even interesting, just completely as it is, and as direct and honest a transmission as can be.
Beautiful.
The affair was a long story.
Yeah, do you mind if I slowly go back and kind of try to deconstruct with you maybe what is you're just talking about?
Yep.
So the first thing I want to say is I've actually met your father, which I completely forgot about until right now.
Yeah.
I think it was Jaunt. You know who Jaunt is?
I know Jaunt, yeah.
Yeah, he was giving a cacao ceremony.
Yeah.
And I believe your father and someone else were helping him like put the show on. It might have even been at one of his place. I'm not even sure.
It's my father and his wife, Michelle. And so him and John actually do a lot of work together. So they go and they do satsang together, and they do cacao ceremonies, and Gentle Warrior, I think, was the name that they were using at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome, right? Did you see them when they were down closer to Spryfield? Because I know they do a couple of locations in that area.
I haven't left the house much in the last couple of months, to be honest. But
Oh, was it? Okay, cool. Yeah, perfect.
but no, I know they're doing like a couple of shows, and I definitely like to check one out.
Yeah. So I feel very lucky to have a dad that went through a transformation and gave, what do you call it, like an example or a mirror or a reflection. It was really helpful. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the thing I want to dive into next, because I mean, I talk to so many different people that don't really have a father figure that they can look up to, or they don't feel like they have that. And your situation kind of sounds super unique, where you and your dad were working together on this spiritual journey of figuring out the question, which I think starts every spiritual journey, whether you realize it at the time or not, which is, who am I? What am I? And that's so unique and so wild to me, just because, like I said, I've talked to so many men, and it's something I study a lot, which is rituals and ceremonies. And the whole part of history of ceremony is taking boys and essentially transforming them into men, trying to put them through some type of experience that will allow them to come into manhood. And to do that with your dad, that must have been just really different than I think what most people probably go through.
Very, very cool. And it's not even something I really appreciated till quite a few years later too, because you never, when you're in something, it just seems normal, right? But then later realizing how, what a lack of masculinity and a lack of fatherhood and a lack of good relations in that type of family context. Yeah, it's very unique actually to have experienced that. I feel very lucky.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah, and like I thank my dad every day for it. And don't get me wrong, my dad is an arsehole in his own right, and I'm an arsehole in my own right. You know, like I don't want to identize or create like images of perfection either. We're all messy humans, but the more we recognize that our humanity and our vulnerability and all of those things are there, it actually just creates a more direct relationship. I just want to say that over and over again, because it means there's no, as little as possible, fucking around or beating around the bush. Like it's just as direct as possible. That's what I try to do at all times.
Oh, I can tell you're very you remind me of Mariah, to be honest. Like Guys like to share.
Yeah, yeah,
Which
totally.
is,
And yeah, Mariah is a very, very powerful figure, so it doesn't surprise me at all that you'd feel that way. And like, I've always really appreciated what everything that she's bringing to the world as well.
yeah.
You guys are a power couple.
Pardon me.
You're a power couple.
um, the other thing I wanted to touch on, just to, I'm slowly going to keep unraveling that other
Perfect.
segment. First off, have you seen Assassin's Creed, the movie?
No, and I haven't played the video games either. And I am a gamer. Like, I'm a gamer through and through, like in my heart. And I haven't played them, but I thought about it. I thought about kind of tiptoeing into it. What do you reckon?
The only reason I mentioned the movie's pretty cool,
Yeah.
and the reason I'm mentioning it is because all of it, he's going through past lives, and he was in the Knights Templar. So it's
Hmm.
literally what you were speaking of. So when you're talking, I was picturing like badass Assassin's Creed Josh, like breaking out, going through the past. Uh,
I'll have to look into that actually, man. That'd be great. It's a funny situation actually, the whole Knights of the Templar thing. I know that I'm kind of taking us off track again, so please keep
Not
doing what
oh,
you're doing and pull me back. But growing up, my dad was always very interested in the Masons and in the Templars as well, and actually helped. And this is before his awakening, which sounds crazy, but there was this period where dad was always very interested in things, but still very stuck in the mainstream. I think a lot of people feel that way. Before you can really break into your spirit, there's like a process where you're kind of flirting with it or playing with it or poking at it. And one thing that he would do is bring us to these sacred sites where the ley lines intersect in Nova Scotia. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
I am unaware.
Kind of like a grid that goes over the top of the earth, the same way there is inside the body, like meridians. That same thing exists on the earth. And so he was always bringing us to these places that Knights of the Templar, Masons, and Druids had kind of coalesced here in Nova Scotia together to create these power spots where you could sit and meditate. And like, I don't believe you need a specific spot to do anything. But at the same time, at the time, that was what my dad was on. He was taking us to those things, but that was all very connected into the secret societies and stuff. And it's funny, in this lifetime, I have no connection to it. In fact, I feel a little bit nervous about it. People talk about getting into the Masons and the Illuminati and all that stuff. Like, I don't feel called to going near it. Actually, I feel quite a strong aversion to it. And the only reason is because like first of all, people are never as powerful as they think they are. So like with like these groups of people, like they've created a fantasy that they're more powerful than they are, in my opinion. And then the politics that go into any group of people, let alone people that are literally actively seeking power, is just no, thank you. I'm happy to stay away from it. But in the past life vision, I was again 23 or 24. I felt like an old man who had gone to the end of my life, and I had done wrong things. I had used power in negative ways. In other words, like a lot of those secret societies, they had a lot of power in the monarchies and in society and stuff like that. And I feel like I was given that power and didn't use it properly. So at the time, again, being a young, fiery, happy dude, it was quite shocking to me to be able to say that, to say, oh my God, like I've abused power in a past life, and having to own that and having to really integrate that. But what happened is, again, we're all abusing power to some extent every day. I don't mean everybody, but that's the way that I grew up. I grew up in a society where people were doing that all the time. So really catching into the root of that and saying fuck, like, and owning it, it really hurt my heart, like it hurt my body to own that. But owning it helped me understand my power more right now and be able to be more careful with it. And I have made mistakes as well. Again, I'm not a perfect being, but like those learning how to wield power. I think as a society, we're kind of coming into a place where we're learning how to have power without abusing it, how to hold that strength of connection and alignment without using it against other people or trying to get things for pure selfish gain. Like, I think it's kind of a big life lesson that's happening for all of our society right now. That's why corruption in the government, corruption in the religions, corruption in the media, all these things are being exposed because we're kind of learning how to be better at it, I think.
Yeah, I'm definitely someone who looks at just kind of looking back at history, and as shitty as things are now, we've been slowly improving for a long time. And sometimes our focus is narrow-minded, just COVID or just this or just that. But overall, I think things are heading in a good direction.
I think so too. And again, that's not even being blindly positive. That's just saying, like, the more information and perspective and empathy and sharing, that we start to have, the more society is going to be better. And if you look back even 10 years ago, it was a different fucking world, man. Like the way people interacted, the power dynamics, all that stuff, it was a lot heavier. And it was yeah, I feel very fucking lucky to be in this time right now.
Yeah, and just exponential growth is kind of a terrifying thing where, you know, we couldn't be doing this like, I don't even know how many years ago, 20, 30 years ago. Never 1,000 years would you think you'd be doing this.
Yeah, and really 5 years ago we could do it, but it would have been choppy, you know, like
Yeah.
just technology is increasing and our ability to communicate. And if you want to know what somebody on the other side of the world is feeling or thinking, you just literally go online, you can find out, you know, like it's really, it's different. It's so different socially and so different technologically that I don't even know, I don't think we can really even understand how profound it is when we're in it. It's something that like 200 years from now in the history books, they'll be like, and this is when they realized racism was stupid, so stopped hurting each other. You know, this is when they realized through communication they could speak to each other no matter where they were in the world. You know, like it'll be a really funny thing to say because as you pointed out, 20 or 30 years ago it didn't exist at all. Even 5 years ago it wasn't what it is now. So like I think it's going to be a funny time in history to look back in.
Totally agree, man. And just hitting on those thought experiment thing, like something I always love to think about is in the future, say however many, say 3,000 years from now, whether it's a different species or it's humans and they're evolved or whatever, and just imagine them like refining this thing called the internet and like loading it up and seeing like there's only one video left and maybe it's this podcast or maybe it's like Rocky Balboa and they're like, or just maybe it's some like random animated comedy and they're like, Jesus Christ, like what were they doing? Like this squirrel's chasing this other squirrel, like
Spoon is too big.
my spoon is too big. I haven't seen that since like junior high.
They were banana people. Okay, they were bananas. Yeah, no, it would be funny, and it would actually probably look a lot like hieroglyphs look to us, because at the time it would have been such an in the moment expression of truth when people were doing that, right? And now we look back at it and we go, oh, that's cute. They drew on walls, but later in life they'll probably be like, yeah, they drew on Facebook walls. Yeah.
Good analogy. Is there any like cool hieroglyphic historical kind of things in Australia? I'm a little ignorant about Australia and its history.
Sure, actually,
the prison
I have to be careful to say this because a friend of mine lives on a property and it's a big ass property, but if you go to a certain point of it, you can actually see some glyphs. But he doesn't want to kind of like let everyone know because there's this feeling of like, fuck, he might come and want to like almost like try to take the land back from him. So there is like, there's a lot going on. And if you go to certain points, you can see grindstones, like there's one quite close to here, and that's where they would sharpen their axes or sharpen their knives on and that kind of stuff. Like, and birthing trees. So as the trees are growing and they're still bendable, they loop them in a certain way so that it ends up being like a bit of a place to sit down in. And those were places specifically for women to give birth to. So those types of things. And I mean, it's absolutely amazing that the way people would have lived and the way people would have been in tune with nature and been able to understand how to work with the trees and work with the land and work with the sun and everything. I mean, Australia in particular, that sun is pretty wild.
It's been hot here these last couple of days.
I've heard. I know it's a bit colder here. That's why I'm wearing a sweater because we're in the middle of our winter now.
Oh, are you? I should mention that you're in Australia.
Everything is completely reversed from Australia and Canada. And if you actually look on the map, it's not exact, but it's pretty much exactly across the world from each other. And then there's the weirdest thing for me is we all know, people drive on the left side of the road. The toilet water flushes the other way. But one that's really funny is that all lights go down here to turn on. So if you're turning on a light, that's just the way it works. You put them down to go on and up to go off.
Oh.
And obviously it's reversed in Canada. And I was just having this laugh one point, like no one discussed that. It would have had to be some sort of the psychology or the physiopsychology of the being in the different hemisphere that would have just created that naturally. There's no way that they were like, oh, you're over there? We're going to make ours go up. And I want you to make yours go down. You're like, no one discussed that. And that's something I just find fascinating, that there is this natural topography and biological topography that actually makes us create this thing. And it's like, oh, it's completely opposite from the opposite side of the world. It's fucking crazy, man.
It's funny, I never thought about that. My brothers actually live in Cayman Islands. So
Where?
it's Cayman Islands.
Oh, sick, beautiful, man. Yeah.
So it's like
Good
a
for him.
similar thing where it's under the rule of Britain, the Queen. So they drive on the left, and like every time I go there, it's like you got to reorientate yourself, right? If there's no one on the road, I'm going on the right. And then like if there's traffic, I can follow traffic. But
And have you spent time doing it? Like, did you actually get to drive on the left side and everything?
oh yeah, I drive when I go down there. But like, there's always this moment where my brain's like, this feels like I'm gonna drive into someone. This feels like I'm gonna drive into someone. No, this is the right thing. Shut up, brain. Like, we just gotta do things a little differently right now.
It's pretty cool though, eh? Like, it's fun psychologically to think that it's kind of like if you learn to hula hoop one way, they say you should learn the other way at the same time. If you're going to skateboard, if you're going to throw anything, it's better to be ambidextrous. So I feel like it's kind of the ultimate form of ambidexterity. That's not a word. Because
No.
because if you don't, you'll die and kill other people too. So like your brain is like, okay, I have to now be very good at driving on the other side of the road because it's a fucking car, and like the stakes are high, you know, like.
Oh, I was driving my buddy to the airport, and it was like 4 a.m. Like there was no one on the roads really. It's like a very small island. Like you can drive the whole thing in like 2 hours. But I'm driving him to the airport, and I'm driving for like 2 minutes, and then he's like, "You know, you're on the wrong side of the road, right?" I'm like, "What the fuck? Why didn't you tell me that like 2 minutes ago?" He's like, "I don't want to figure it out." Like what?
Still, every now and then it happens to me. It's very rare, but like one time, like I think even last month, I started. Lilly was like, "What the fuck?" And I was like, "Yes, right." everything's fine.
Which is a weird one though. Like that must still get you, does it?
It doesn't anymore. But I've been coming back and forth from Australia for almost 8 years now. So I've been. This will be my fifth. Actually, 2.5 or 3 years out of 8 I've spent here. So it's like, it's been a lot of time and a lot of readjustment. But the very first couple of times though, I almost killed myself and others like heaps of times. I still have a friend who always brings it up because when we turnabouts or roundabouts here are common instead of stoplights. So like 50-50 chance it's going to be a roundabout or a stoplight, whereas at home I think it's more like a 90-10 chance. Like almost always it's going to be a stoplight. But at here it's kind of half and half. And the thing is when you enter a roundabout, you have to look to the right. But of course, at home, when you enter a roundabout, you have to look to the left. And that was the thing that fucked me up the most. And like, yeah, I almost killed my friends and family.
As we laugh. No, I totally get it. Totally can relate.
Yeah. Yeah. So can I ask you, what projects are you working on right now then? You got this podcast going. Like, are you hosting classes or groups or anything as well?
Yeah, so I have too many projects going on for sure, but I've also recently been dealing kind of with a health condition. So I just took a lot of time off. So well, not recently, about a year ago, I got bit by a tick. I got Lyme disease.
Really?
Yeah. So,
Fuck.
yeah.
Do you remember the instance, like where you're like, fuck, there's the tick and you had to get it out and stuff?
Well, that's the weird thing. Like sometimes people see the tick and they can take it out and bring it to a lab, get it tested, different things like that. I never really noticed what happened. All I know
Still in you somewhere, man. It's still in you, bro.
I know, he's out now. But like our cats, same thing. Like it's just a tick-heavy area in Spryfield. So I've pulled like 6 ticks out of Tig's face. Like he'll come home and we have little tweezers now that we use to take him out. But yeah, I got this thing, so it's kind of slowed me down a lot. But to answer your question, I started doing coaching back up again about the same time I started doing the podcast.
Nice.
Doing a couple classes, but I'm mostly working on like video projects.
So you had the COVID personal project initiative?
Honestly, you could call it that. Like I have one thing called the 4 steps to fortifying your health, which is the same thing as protecting yourself from COVID, protecting your like immune system from
Immune
virus.
system, sunlight, all that good stuff.
Yeah, you know, nature and good oxygen and vitamin D.
Breathing is good. Yes,
Breathing.
yes.
Breathing's fantastic, especially deeply.
That was the one thing. I still don't know where I stand on COVID in terms of how conspiratorial it is,
Mm.
how much of that was an afterthought, how much of it was planned. I really don't know. I can't say for sure. But I do know that we probably shouldn't all be in stuffy buildings not getting sun or oxygen. Like that doesn't seem like a very good idea no matter who you are.
Yeah, and there's so many angles to talk about COVID, but the thing that like really pisses me off is when I started seeing YouTube and other places taking down information. So only Health Canada or different health organizations could like put out information, even though like, of course, you're going to naturally put out information at first, like wear a mask, sanitize your hand, things that eventually are going to change as you gain more information. But the thing that I really didn't like is people are saying to take vitamin D and get sunlight and oxygen and to take vitamin C, like things you would just naturally do to help your immune system. And they were like, sorry, this video is getting taken down because this doesn't cure COVID. And it's like,
Right.
no, but having a healthy immune system can help.
I'm pretty sure even the World Health Organization just recently had that revelation. They went, actually, no, it's really important to be in the sun to have good oxygen. Thanks.
I have a terrible story that's related. And it starts with me getting vitamin D deficient in the Bahamas.
Oh, well, those are two strings of sentences I didn't think would go together.
They really shouldn't, and that's why I feel embarrassed to tell it. But I used to play, I'm not sure if you know like my background, but I used to play poker professionally.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so like I would go and I'd play these tournaments in a lot of different places. And I was at a tournament series in the Bahamas. And when you're playing tournaments, pretty much how it works is if you do good and you get to day 2 or day 3, then you go into the next day, like it's either the next day or the day after. So I was playing poker like 12 to 14 hours, sleep, wake up, play the day 2, sleep, wake up, play day 3, sleep, wake up, play the next one. And it's kind of what you want to do when you're on these trips because you have like a limited amount of time. So like speaking from like a business perspective, you want to like play as much as you can kind of thing. But it's a beautiful, actually, it was actually raining quite a bit. And then like the first day the sun was shining, I couldn't go outside because I was like committed to playing the whole day, right? And after being there for, I don't even remember how long, 2 or 3 weeks, I come home and I just was at the Bahamas. People are like seeing these pictures of like sunshine and beaches and pools, and I'm vitamin D deficient and I have to like supplement. Like, Jesus Christ, Kyle.
That's a cool adventure though, man. Like, if you made it to day 4, you must be pretty good at what you're doing.
Yeah, there can be a lot of luck in poker for sure. I like to relate poker to life. So there's a lot of skill in life. It's like making good decisions, but there's also a lot of luck. And that's kind of that whole positive, negative thing we could almost start this conversation with. How, to me, life is just kind of happening. And when you try to step in front of it and dictate what happens, I think that's how every guy lives like the first part of his life. That's how I live my life. I was like, all the good shit, I was like, I created this. All the bad shit, I was like, I'm going to change this and fix this because it's wrong. And then you slowly realize like, oh, like life's got hurricanes and tornadoes and sunshine and beaches. It's all part of it.
That was one thing, just to come back to it. Oh, I can hear my echo. No, I can't anymore. When you're talking about that, it just reminds me of, like, yeah, how men kind of suck. Like, in general, like more pig-headed, more egotistical, and I'm actually not saying that in a negative way. I know it sounds negative, but I mean, like, we all have our growth points, but in general, I've had to kind of own that in myself, that as a male, I have male tendencies that are not always healthy. Just like it's easier for me to sit in that, you know, like to know that that's the case and to really own it and to work with it, because without that, it's easy for those unconscious tendencies to take over. Yeah.
Yeah. That actually just reminds me something I just wanted to touch on before. I think I already know the answer, but I was going to ask you about DMT, psychedelics, what your thoughts, use them, what kind of your thoughts are on that.
Do you want to just launch right now? Okay, yeah. So I have a fairly extensive background with psychedelics. I think when I was 24, 25, I had LSD for the first time, and I had a really strong moment of oneness through that. MDMA has been a back and forth relationship for a very, very long time, and something that I have to be careful with is I can't overdo it because my body is just getting too old now. I'm 35. So if I take too much,
Don't put
thank you. Yeah, it really does affect me negatively, so I have to be really careful with that. But in its right time, MDMA is like a spice of life. Is one of my favorite experiences. It really is a heart opener. It makes you feel a lot of love. It brings you into truth and honesty with the people around you. Like that's why people are using for therapy, right? Mushrooms, a fairly extensive relationship. Obviously cannabis, I've had my backs and forths with that for a long time. But DMT, now we're getting to the juice. DMT is something that I fucking love, man. Have you had experience with it?
not direct DMT, but I've done 2
Ayahuasca.
ayahuasca retreats.
Yeah, so obviously ayahuasca is the full form mother, right? That's where you're surrendering to the fucking mother of the Amazon. Like, take me. Um, and DMT is just a much quicker, expedited version of very similar to the same thing. And yeah, I've got extensive relationship, probably partaking around 50 to 60 times with DMT, and ayahuasca only 2 times, but has been incredibly profound. And it's funny, after taking ayahuasca, the DMT journeys became more similar to ayahuasca as well. And same with mushrooms. After taking DMT, my mushroom journeys started to look like DMT. So I'm not sure exactly how they all blend together chemically, but yeah, it's been really, really helpful to experience that. I mean, very similar to positive thinking and stuff like that, or spiritual trips. I've had to be careful not to glorify psychedelics. So in other words, it's not like everyone needs to try insert whatever. It's like, well, that's not true. I mean, that can't be true. In fact, I have enough friends that have had bad mental trips actually from some of these more intense ones too. So I don't ever want to be a pusher or someone who implies that everybody should do this or that. But at the same time, yeah, it's been super helpful. I mean, what DMT does is it rips your ego away for just a moment, and in the space that's left after your ego is gone, you kind of get to experience your essence or spirit. It's pretty awesome. As far as things to do, it's not a bad thing, you know. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have an extensive relationship with psychedelics. Have held space for people. Like, there's a lot of people that want to get into psychedelics but are a little bit nervous. So I've been a guide before. So I'll sit down while a person trips on mushrooms, and you just got, maybe you get involved by saying, "Hey, I hope you're feeling good," or "How you doing?" But most likely you shut the fuck up and just let a person experience whatever they're experiencing, you know, like, so that's been really, really powerful for me. And being able to have edible cannabis with people that maybe, I'm thinking of family that maybe wouldn't normally do those things, but as it became legal in Canada, suddenly we were all sucking on lollies and stuff together. That was really fun.
How quick things change, eh?
Yeah, it's funny. It's not here. So here, it's kind of like it was 3 years before legalization, where it's socially acceptable, but at any minute the card could be pulled and they could use it against you. And so it's kind of funny to see how everyone is kind of exactly what it was like 3 years before legalization, which makes me think it probably will legalize here in Australia within the next few years.
That would be cool. I slowly.
Yeah, but is there any more questions about psychedelics in particular? I
Uh,
could go on.
yeah, like pretty much just what kind of brought me that was when you're talking about your experience with Kundalini and energy. Um, myself, like I've done some Kundalini, like I have a lot of like kind of injuries that I'm kind of like mitigating. So I kind of do like my own little morning routine, you could call it. So I haven't had these like deep experiences, but I've heard people talk about them. But where I have had the deep experiences that sound so similar to when I hear people talk is through the use of mushrooms and ayahuasca and these other things. that's why I kind of wanted to ask you that. And like I said, I'm pretty damn sure I knew the answer. But
I'm pretty open online about all those things. But the truth is, again, just like a spiritual adventure, it's really important not to identify with it. So just like the only one word of advice to anyone who's watching this is, psychedelics are fucking awesome. Spiritual trips are awesome. Just make sure not to identify with the experiences that we have, because that will eventually become an ego, which will eventually become a block perceptually, right? So in other words, I know heaps of people that are like, yeah, ayahuasca is the only way to enlightenment. And if you don't do ayahuasca, you're not enlightened. And they'll kind of look at you like, oh, you haven't done it yet? Oh, well. And so I just try to be, exactly. So I try to be really careful with that, not to imply that somebody's less evolved or less experienced just because they haven't done something like that. And then if a person's interested or ready for an experience that's kind of like it's not a gentle movement of enlightenment, it's like rip, then it's the perfect thing, right? And a lot of, I remember a friend of mine saying that in this, it was actually, do you know the Baha'i faith? Have you heard of them before?
I have.
Yeah, so it's like a fringe Persian spiritual uh, uh, tradition. And I remember a friend of mine who is in the Baha'i faith was saying that they believe this is an enlightenment time. This is the time of enlightenment. It's the time of positive change. It's the time of growth. And in that, it could come from any source. You could be meditating in the mountains. You could be with a shaman with ayahuasca. You could just be turning a corner and all of a sudden just see life completely differently. And he was just saying that like it's really important to keep that openness. And him being this person I was talking to is not into psychedelics. In fact, a part of their religion is not to do that. But he was still positively saying that a person could easily have any experience like that. And it doesn't matter where the source comes from. It's not about one specific way or one specific teaching or one specific tradition. If you kind of follow the trail of any of them, you can really get into these same things. So psychedelics or meditation or yoga path or anything of those things, doesn't matter what it is. As long as you just start going down that path, most likely you'll have the experiences that will keep you connected and lead to healing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's something that I think is worth mentioning, because sometimes I kind of forget that like other people are here / viewing this. So I think just want to thank you for kind of pointing out like what people might be thinking during this point in time, because it's one of the main things I came out of ayahuasca saying. I was like, because when you first start having these experiences, you're like, I want my family to do ayahuasca. I want my friends to do ayahuasca. I want everyone to come here and we can all talk about it and have a big party. But the reality is what works for you is not always what someone else is ready for, is not always what's going to work for them. And a huge thing to mention, since we are talking about this so much, is people with mental health disorders. Like sometimes this, like I'm sure it sounds like you've known people, and I've known people that have taken substances and I've watched them change, and not necessarily for the better. And like you said, there's many paths to figuring out this question of who you are. And I think one of the things that's in common with all these things, because that's, worth talking about, is whether it's ayahuasca or meditation or walking in the woods or an MDMA good experience with your buddy or whatever, is truth. Like if you follow truth long enough, and that's kind of obviously a very hard thing to figure out, whether you're on the right thing of leading to truth. But if you're looking, I think it's kind of eventually going to be met with a mirror of like yourself, and that's essentially going to show you like what's going on, who you are. And that's something that you're someone who does so many of these Facebook Lives. You've got your own podcast. And something that I've just realized with making YouTube videos and now starting this podcast is when you go back and you watch these videos, what are you seeing? How do you relate making this video, being in social media eye, to personal development?
I had this really beautiful YouTube channel that I started in 2011 and it went to 2017 and I deleted it in a moment of self-rage.
Oh my God.
Depression 3 years ago. I was going through one of those identity strippings and I lost everything and I went through a really painful divorce and it was fucked. Everything was wrong. But in that, everything being wrong, obviously that's the lessons and everything. But in that moment, I actually looked at my old YouTube and saw, because I was speaking openly, but kind of dumbly and naively about so many subjects. And I was just like, fuck, man, like, And I deleted it, and I have to say, I wish I didn't. I
Mm.
wish that at that moment I was strong enough to put it on private or something, because then 3 months later, when I came out of the fog and came back to myself, I was like, oh, that was a good historical record, you know, and I lost it. So I've been doing it for a long time, and I don't watch back the live videos I do very often. Sometimes I do, but at this point, I'm producing 5 or 6 hours worth of content per week, so I don't really have the time to just go and listen to my own work, even. You know, like I'm just kind of moving on. I try to trust. I trust that. I try to remember that I'm always doing my best, and that best is changing, like, drastically. So I know for a fact that there's stuff online that I specifically wouldn't necessarily think, oh, that's who I am now, or that's how I like to operate, and it just is what it is, you know. Like, and there's no real other way around it. I look at other people on this path, like Russell Brand, for example, and it's like he's got heaps of embarrassing shit out there, and you just have to just eat it and keep moving forward and recognize that this right now is going to look like that 5 years from now. You know, like it always does.
Yeah.
But it is. And also, just to be completely vulnerable, I do have social insecurities, as most people do. In other words, knowing that I'm not perfect, but I'm also in a position of leadership that I put myself in. Now, I feel that social pressure that can come up, because I know I'm not perfect. I know I've made mistakes. I know that I've got to pass before I experience more open-minded points of view where I wasn't as open and gentle, you know? So I know that about myself, and there's nothing you can do about it other than keep walking forward. And for me to be as honest about that as possible without compromising my integrity as well. Like that's what I'm always trying to fuck with and play with.
Yeah, nice. I've just I've just seen in my own experience just so much, like when you do rewatch these things and you're always like, oh God, is that me? And then you're like, I said that, I thought that. But it, like you said, it's a really good historical thing to go back on to like learn and grow off of. So I
I
thank
just
you
hope
for
as a culture, the next wave is that wokeness is a process. And that process is not something that we should take for granted or we should assume either. It's something that, as you said, it's a rite of passage to change your mind, to change your perspective, to grow beyond who you were to become something else. Is essentially it's a privilege. And
that.
so knowing that that's the case, it's I hope that as a culture we recognize that it is messy to grow, and because it's all on the internet, we all have messy bits that are going to be there. I remember there was this beautiful activist, this is quite a few years ago, but an activist who was really standing up for a cause. And then someone was like, yeah, and they showed pictures of them making out with people at a club or something, you know, like it was something slightly sexual or whatever. And they were like, yeah, well, you're just this party person. And I remember that chick, I think it was a black woman. She was like, yeah, I fucking partied. Yeah, I was a slut. I don't give a fuck because I'm here to
Oh
do
no.
the movement that we're like, whoa, like that's amazing. That's the attitude. So the other thing is people can only weaponize what you kind of allow them to some extent. I know that's not totally true, but if I sit and think about my past and I go, oh my God, like I know I've made mistakes and stuff, and I dwell on that, I'm kind of creating an opening for people to kind of to stab at me as well. So I try hard energetically to accept my own past as much as possible and keep on moving forward. But yeah, it's funny to watch back some videos and just to think, fuck you're young and dumb, dude.
Yeah, and just kind of the audacity, I think, of other people to be like, you did this 15 years ago, so that means that what you believe now has no value.
Yeah, it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem realistic, actually, I think is the big thing, because everybody's growing. And in this time of information exchange, this time of perspective sharing, there's more growth than I think we've ever seen, really, socially and in pretty much all ways. So it's like, hopefully, again, the next wave or the next phase of our evolution is going to be to understand that process and then encourage it rather than shitting on each other for not being perfect. And I can fall into that too, man. I have a past with somebody, then they become more popular and really move forward, and a part of me is like, yeah, but are you sure you're still not that same person who hurt my feelings before? And in my best moments, I'll contact people in those moments and try to clear the air in my best moments.
It's a powerful practice.
Yeah, Yeah, and again, I'm not always in my best moment, but in general, I try very hard to do that. This it's all that 12 steps, right? Making amends, forgiving oneself and others. Like those 12 steps are actually pretty potent. I wouldn't want to subscribe to them or become like a 12 stepper. But that the program and the protocol that they put down is pretty much works for anyone on every subject.
Yeah, I've heard of, you look similar to him and he speaks a similar thing, but Russell Brand.
Well, exactly. I mean, I'm not going to take claim for that. He's more invested in that world than I ever could be. And I don't plan to be abstinent from things like drugs and sex and stuff like that, which is something that he's really pushing for right now. I'm like, you go, bro. I'm not really my thing, but you go, bro.
Yeah, kind of what we said, each person is so different. So
That's it.
drug for someone brings them to awakening, and for someone else can bring their life to a crashing halt. So
Exactly. Kyle, we're approaching on an hour right now. Do you feel okay if we head towards wrap up?
yeah, man, for sure. I've really enjoyed talking to you. You're an interesting dude. Do you
Yeah.
think you could, how can people connect with you?
I'd say my personal Facebook, so just Josh Coleman, is the easiest way. But my wife and I have also launched a project called Ethereal Misfits.
Hmm.
So if you check out Ethereal Misfits on Facebook and kind of get into that, that's probably the best way to keep up with our work. I just want to very quickly explain what that means. So again, being a person who has been in many different communities and really in different philosophies, so kind of more into the New Age aspect of things, more into Buddhism at times, more into the Kabbalah, like really focus on these different things, I realize that I don't quite fit into any of them. And yet I have a lot of joy in playing with a lot of those philosophies and thought experiments and being in those. So when we created Ethereal Misfits, it was to say, I'm a misfit even to spiritual beliefs. You never know what's going to happen. I'm keeping that creative flow open. So I'm going to keep my evolution so that it's not pinholed in one area. And if it could be that I might even study something and then almost have a bit of a misfitty type attitude towards that afterwards. And it's actually been really great because I feel like I don't have to be a pure being. It's perfect. Ethereal Misfits is the perfect banner for me because it leaves a lot of room for growth.
I love that name. And I can definitely relate to the outcast misfit because, yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way.
Honestly, there's a big call right now. We might find out that misfits and going against the grain and starting our own different types of communities that involve conglomerations from different aspects and traditions. That might be where we're heading as a people as well, which would be pretty cool.
Totally. Cool, man. This was fun, and I'm sure we'll keep in touch.
I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, man, for sure.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
All right, peace out.